What did the old advice miss?
I don't think the old advice missed anything in that the current public health guidelines are based on really good science, and there's really compelling reasons why we recommend people get 150 minutes of moderate exercise or 75 minutes of vigorous exercise. But I think the issue is that the vast majority of people aren't listening to the old guidelines. Depending on the survey or study, we're probably down around 15 to 20% of individuals that actually meet public health guidelines weekly. And so the exercise and health psychologist will highlight the need to give people more menu choices or more exercise options to choose from, and hopefully that's where our work and interval training in general offers people with some more choices that in particular allow them to exercise in a time-efficient manner and still reap benefits.
They're not listening, or they're acting on it isn't something they want to do?
I think it's a combination of things. I think most people are generally aware of the public health guidelines. They might not be able to cite 150 minutes per week of moderate exercise, but they know they should be active most days of the week. There is this sense that the current guidelines take a lot of time. And so I think a problem is that a lot of people, if they don't have 45 minutes or an hour in the day, they'll tend to blow off exercise because they think, well, look, I can't do much in 15 minutes. So they tend to blow it off. When you ask people what the problem is, the number one cited barrier is lack of time. Now, clearly, that's an excuse for a lot of people. If we just look at social media use and how that's changed over the last 15 or 20 years, clearly it's an excuse for some people, but a lot of people feel and actually do lead very busy, time-pressed lives. There's a lot of demands on our time, and so it's tough to structure in that exercise, especially given the traditional approach, blocking in 45 minutes to an hour, and that doesn't include, getting to the gym potentially. And so I think with intervals, it offers, as we like to say, it offers a way for people to fit exercise in their life rather than having to structure their life around exercise. And we're even learning more about this concept of exercise snacking, where, for example, 3 10-minute exercise sessions spread throughout the day may actually be better in terms of controlling your blood sugar, for example, than if you were to do a 30-minute block of exercise all at once.
Does health only benefit you, or is it something that translates into business and relationships?
It's obviously outside of my specific area of expertise a little bit, but we're exercise to improve health. It's not just physical health. We're increasingly learning a lot about exercise and brain health, and exercise and its potential to help ward off things like dementia as we age, and exercise is good for relationship building. And again, those are not, I'm more interested, or my expertise lies in more the physiological adaptations and how those translate into physical health adaptations, so things like lower blood pressure or better blood sugar control. I'm not a relationship expert or the brain health side of things, but I think we know more and more every day that exercise is indeed a medicine that can affect all of these things, and generally in a very positive manner.
You talked about lots of people's stuff that they found. What was specific core stuff of what you found?
Two of the main things that we look at are what we call cardiorespiratory fitness, and that's the type of cardio health that most people think about, this idea of having a healthy heart, healthy blood vessels, healthy lungs, and that's all about getting good oxygen circulation throughout the body. So that's something that we can measure very objectively in the laboratory using a maximal oxygen uptake test, or a VO2 max test that athletes or people who are interested in exercise might be aware of. And so we can show, for example, that with 6 weeks of interval training, cardiorespiratory fitness goes up by a unit known as a MET, or a metabolic equivalent. That's not so important, I'm sure, for your readers or listeners, but we know that people who have a 1 MET higher fitness level have a 13% lower risk of dying from all causes and a 15% lower risk of developing cardiovascular disease. Now, that's not to say that the 6 weeks of training is going to translate directly into that, because these other numbers I'm citing are from epidemiological studies. But if your fitness is higher, your risk of dying is lower, and your risk of developing many chronic conditions is lower as well. So, a lot of people think you exercise to lose weight and that's what confers health. No, there's a direct line there between exercise boosting fitness regardless of body weight. And again, if you look at large-scale studies, you can compare an overweight individual and a normal weight individual who are of comparable fitness, and their mortality risk is essentially the same, which again points to this notion that fitness is an important objective measure of health. So that's arguably one of the most important things we looked at. And then in a lot of our studies, we try to get an index of how well people are controlling their blood sugar. And there's lots of different ways to do this, but it's a measure called insulin sensitivity. So if you're more sensitive to insulin, your risk of developing diabetes tends to be lower. And in our most recent study, we compared the short hard intervals versus longer traditional exercise, we saw very similar improvements in insulin sensitivity on average, even though the intervaler trainers were spending five-fold less time, like the time commitment involved was five-fold lower for the interval trainers compared to the other groups, again speaking to this idea that intervals can be a time-efficient way to confer health benefits.
There's a lot of science. Is your book just science, or do you also give advice as to what to do, or do people have to figure that out for themselves, or have you worked out some advice?
The book essentially tries to distill down or boil down what is often complex science and present it hopefully in an accessible and compelling manner. We also give specific workouts. So there's 12 different workouts in the book, all grounded in science. So people could look at any of the workouts and know that if I did this workout for 6 weeks, there's a study out there that showed that's going to boost my cardiorespiratory fitness at least, or confer some of these other health benefits that we've been talking about. So I think hopefully what sets it apart from a number of other books out there is every workout we present is grounded in scientific evidence. There's an actual study linked to it that showed it was effective, but hopefully it's presented in a way that people can use it to, not necessarily as a template as I have to do this, but it gives 12 different examples or again flavors of styles of interval training, because some flavors of interval training are more suited to some people than others, and some people might prefer a specific style of interval training over another one. So the book tries to provide both of that, and we also address the psychology behind exercise, some of the risk-benefit analyses. And so what I tried to do was interview other leading experts in the field who have specific expertise in areas that I do not have. So hopefully it offers something for everyone. I hope it's just not a dry read about the science, and it also talks a little bit about my journey, because one of the reasons I first got into interval training is because I was very busy, time-pressed individual as well, and I found it as a very effective way to maintain my own fitness.
So it's really a full gamut.
It's not just a workout book. It's not just a book about the science. Again, I hope it offers something for everyone. We talk a little bit about the history of interval training, both from the athletic history and the scientific history. And it might surprise people to know that, for example, cardiac patients in the early 90s were being trained with intervals in Germany. Roger Bannister, obviously when he was making his assault on the 4-minute mile, was a very busy medical student who trained on his lunch using intervals. Finnish Olympians were winning gold medals almost at the turn of the century. So in the 1912 Olympics, for example, using interval training principles. So the basic concept has been around for a long time. And if you trace the history, both scientifically and athletically, it sort of comes in and out of flavor over time. But it's certainly an enduring theme now for well over 100 years.
So readers will also get the story of the intervals as well as some story about you.
For sure. And hopefully a little bit of story of how the body works. Again, the basic physiology that is linked to health. We try to provide some tips and hacks along the way. So, 5 ways to maintain your exercise motivation, and that's coming from a leading psychologist in the field. So we try to provide some specific tips like that. There's a chapter on nutrition. It's not a nutrition book by any means, but there is a chapter that tries to give some tips on nutrition and strategies that you might adopt in your own life, again, to help with healthy living.
So a personal question. This is coming. You suggested in a 2011 article that burpees rank among the most effective single exercise, not thinking that anyone would actually do that many of them. And so I followed your suggestion. I did them for 5 years. So now that someone's actually done it, what do you think about actually doing burpees every day, twice a day? Am I crazy? a genius, or what?
Maybe a little of all. I think you found something that works for you, and that's, again, if you talk to the psychologist, that's probably the biggest thing. The best exercise for you is the one that you, if not enjoy, you enjoy once it's finished, and you feel good about having done it. So for you, clearly that's burpees. We've talked about this before. I think it requires a very high level of motivation to do the same exercise and the same intense exercise every day for 5 years. But again, it's something that has worked for you. So it's still, I still think, you're a little bit crazy in that you do it every day. In some ways, it is genius because you found something that you like and have been able to maintain. And clearly, it's something that's worked for you in terms of how you feel about yourself. So, like I say, a little bit of both. I must say, I'm amazed that you've been able to keep it up, because when I gave that quote to Gretchen Reynolds, I honestly couldn't think that anyone would keep this up for so long. So it's I think you're an example of an encouraging message. Like, and I call them field reports. I loved, when you first reached out to me, I thought, wow, that is awesome, and it's such, I think, a good story for the book, because it just highlights this idea that some of this research can have an impact, and it's a flavor that is certainly not widely applied, but it's the flavor that works for you.
I look forward to one day it becoming widely applied, and everybody's like, this is the best thing. It works so well.
Well, again, not to sound too silly, but what if it became standard one day to knock off a set of burpees while you're waiting in line at the ATM at the bank, and people didn't look at you like you're crazy, or, while you're riding the subway to do a few pull-ups on the bar or the straps that hold you up. And again, this idea of sprinkling exercise within the day. I write in the book that when I was writing the book, my wife is working her way through Friends episodes on Netflix, and there's one episode where Phoebe runs through the park, and I think the quote is she looks like a combination of Kermit the Frog and someone else. But this idea that she sprints and she runs almost like a little kid. You're just so happy to be out there running, and Rachel's quite embarrassed by her. She's like, oh my God, people are looking at us. And I think that's what most people would feel like if they knocked off a set of burpees in line at the ATM or did a set of pull-ups on the subway. But man, if we didn't worry so much about that self-consciousness, I think it would be pretty easy to work these little exercise snacks into our life more easily.
It reminds me of, I saw an interview of this guy who was one of the top parkour runners, parkour free runner people. And he said, people ask me when I started doing parkour. I said, when did you stop? Because kids do it. Kids run around all the time.
Right.